October 14th, 2026, a Thursday morning. Most Americans woke up thinking about paychecks, traffic, coffee. They believed their country was invincible because of its military, its technology, its democratic values. They were wrong. America didn't need to lose a war to collapse. It just needed to lose electricity for 30 days. And when the electromagnetic pulse hit at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time, it wasn't the missiles that killed the nation. It was the balance sheet. Think about this for a moment. The United States economy isn't built on land or labor anymore. It's built on electrons moving through copper wire at the speed of light. Every single transaction, every dollar, every debt payment, every payroll system depends on one assumption: the power stays on. An EMP doesn't destroy buildings. It doesn't kill people directly. It simply erases that assumption. And when that assumption dies, so does the ledger. So does the economy. So does everything. Before the pulse, America looked unstoppable. The gross domestic product stood at $28 trillion. The stock market had just hit record highs. Every major corporation, every bank, every hospital, every military base was networked into a single vast organism. It hummed. It glowed. It moved money across continents in microseconds. Wall Street traders made fortunes with algorithms that executed 10,000 trades per second. Farmers in Iowa used GPS-guided tractors that planted seeds with millimeter precision. Grandmothers paid for groceries by tapping their phones against a screen. It was elegant. It was seamless. It felt permanent. The entire system had become a single point of failure. 92% of all monetary transactions were digital. Only 8% of the money supply existed as physical cash. The electrical grid itself was a patchwork of aging infrastructure. Transformers built in the 1970s. It seemed too expensive, too unlikely, too paranoid. So America built an empire on a foundation of silicon and assumptions. And when the pulse came, both shattered in the same instant. The addiction, electricity as economic oxygen. They are electricity. Remove power for 1 hour, and you have an inconvenience. Remove it for 1 day, and you have a crisis. Remove it for 1 week, and you have economic cardiac arrest. Remove it for a month, and you have national bankruptcy. Let's talk numbers. The United States consumed 4 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity per year. That's 11 billion kilowatt hours every single day. Every second that power stayed on, the economy generated $32 million in economic activity. But here's the kicker. The moment it stopped, the economy didn't pause. It started bleeding. Within the first 24 hours, the financial sector lost $250 billion in halted transactions. Within 48 hours, supply chains seized up, costing another $400 billion. The GDP didn't shrink. It evaporated. And the antagonist in this story wasn't a foreign army. It was time. Every hour without power multiplied the damage exponentially. Hospitals burned through generator fuel. Water treatment plants failed. Sewage systems backed up. And every single one of those failures had a price tag. A price that accumulated in a ledger nobody could access because the computers were dead. Sovereignty is solvency. And America was hemorrhaging both. Let's walk through the timeline of collapse. Day 1, October 14th, 9:47 a.m. The pulse sweeps across the continental United States. It lasts less than a second. But in that second it induces voltage spikes in every unshielded electronic device. Power plants trip offline, substations explode. Vehicle computers fry. The grid doesn't flicker, it dies. By 10:15 a.m., trading on the New York Stock Exchange has halted, not because anyone decided to close it, but because the building has no power, no computers, no way to execute trades. Trillions of dollars in assets simply freeze. They exist somewhere in the memory of dead machines, but they cannot move, cannot be bought, cannot be sold. The market hasn't crashed, it's vanished. By noon, hospital emergency rooms switch to manual triage. Ventilators stop. Dialysis machines go silent. Electronic medical records disappear. Doctors operate with pen and paper and prayer. Pharmacies cannot access prescription databases. Insulin, refrigerated at precise temperatures, begins to spoil. By 6 p.m., gas stations run dry. Without electric pumps, fuel stays trapped in underground tanks. Cars, most of them disabled anyway, sit abandoned on highways. No fuel means no generators. No generators means no backup power. No backup power means hospitals, police stations, and water plants go dark. The cascade accelerates. By midnight, the federal government finally reaches the public, not through television or internet. Those are gone. But through AM radio broadcasts from hardened military transmitters. The message is brief. Stay calm, stay home. Help is coming. But there's no timeline, no explanation, no plan. The cash was gone. The credit was frozen. The cavalry wasn't coming that day, 2 through 7. The liquidity death spiral, October 15th. Banks do not open. Even if they wanted to, their vault systems are electronic. Their records are digital. Nobody knows who owns what. Account balances exist only in the memory of servers now dead or corrupted. A man with $1 million in his checking account has the same access to his money as a man with $10. Zero. ATMs, of course, are useless. The 8% of money that existed as physical cash is already in circulation, and it's running out fast. By day 3, a $20 bill can buy a case of bottled water. By day 5, it buys a single gallon. Not because of inflation, but because nobody trusts the currency anymore. Everyone knows the banks are dead. And if the banks are dead, what backs the dollar? Nothing. Just faith. And faith is evaporating faster than the water supply. Corporations begin to collapse in sequence. Amazon cannot process orders. Walmart cannot restock stores. McDonald's cannot run franchises. Without electricity, without logistics, without payment systems, the entire corporate superstructure simply stops. Employees don't quit. They just stop showing up. Because there's no payroll, no direct deposit, no way to verify hours or wages. The employment rate doesn't decline. It ceases to exist as a measurable concept. State and local governments fare even worse. Tax collection is digital. Payroll is digital. Emergency services coordination is digital. Governors issue executive orders, but there's no way to transmit them. Mayors hold press conferences, but nobody has a television to watch. Leadership becomes local and improvised. A town councilman with a megaphone has more reach than the president. By October 20th, 1 week after the pulse, the United States government estimates it has lost $9 trillion in economic activity. But here's the real nightmare. Nobody can verify that number. The Treasury Department's computers are dead. The Federal Reserve systems are offline. The Bureau of Economic Analysis has no data. The ledger, the master record of who owns what, who owes whom, what exists and what doesn't, has been erased. America isn't broke. It's worse than broke. It's economically invisible. The smoking gun. The debt payment that couldn't happen October 21st. A date that should have been routine. The United States Treasury owed a bond payment. $58 billion to foreign creditors. China, Japan, the United Kingdom. The payment was automatic, scheduled, guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Except the payment system was electric. The Federal Reserve's Fedwire network, which moved trillions of dollars every day, was offline. The Treasury Department couldn't access its accounts, couldn't contact creditors, couldn't execute the transfer. For the first time in 249 years, the United States defaulted on its debt, not because it didn't have the money, but because it couldn't move the money. Let that number sink in. $58 billion, unpaid, not refused, just inaccessible. And the bondholders, sitting in Tokyo and London and Beijing, saw the missed payment and drew the only logical conclusion. The United States was insolvent. Credit default swaps, those insurance policies on government debt, began to trigger. Except they couldn't pay out either, because the insurance company systems were down too. The entire global financial system, built on the assumption of American stability, started to buckle. The dollar, no longer backed by a functioning economy, began its free fall on foreign exchange markets. Within 72 hours, it lost 40% of its value against the euro. This was the foreclosure, not of a house, but of a superpower, the climax. When money dies and barter returns. By October 28th, 2 weeks after the pulse, the American economy had regressed 150 years. Currency was worthless. Credit didn't exist. The only thing that mattered was physical goods: food, water, medicine, fuel, skills. In cities, barter networks emerged. A doctor traded a tooth extraction for 20 pounds of rice. A mechanic fixed a bicycle in exchange for a box of shotgun shells. A carpenter built a water filter for 3 cans of gasoline. Value became tangible again. If you couldn't eat it, burn it, or use it to survive, it was worthless. The social consequences were biblical. Hunger arrived first. The average American city held a 3-day supply of food. By week 2, shelves were empty. FEMA attempted airdrops, but without working vehicles, without communication networks, distribution was chaotic. Shipments intended for hospitals ended up in parking lots. Crowds fought over pallets of MREs. People died not from starvation yet, but from violence over food. Cold came next. October turned to November. Temperatures dropped. Without electricity, furnaces didn't work. Without gas deliveries, backup heating failed. Northern states faced a grim equation: burn furniture and books to stay warm or freeze. Thousands chose to migrate south on foot. Highways became refugee trails. And then came the ultimate humiliation: loss of sovereignty. On November 2nd, 3 weeks after the pulse, the International Monetary Fund held an emergency session. The United States, unable to pay its debts, unable to provide for its citizens, formally requested a bailout. $2 trillion in emergency loans. The conditions were brutal. Austerity measures. Foreign oversight of reconstruction. collateral in the form of strategic resource rights. America, the world's sole superpower 3 weeks earlier, was now a debtor nation under international receivership. Sovereignty is solvency, and the solvency was gone. The generational scar, 50 years to rebuild a ledger, the grid came back slowly, not in weeks, but in years. The first substations were restored by April 2027, 6 months after the pulse. But replacing every blown transformer, every fried circuit, every corrupted database took decades. By 2035, most major cities had stable power again. By 2045, the rural grid was finally rebuilt, but the economic damage was permanent. The default on debt obligations destroyed America's credit rating. For 30 years, the United States couldn't borrow money at reasonable rates. Infrastructure projects stalled. Social programs collapsed. The generation that survived the pulse, the so-called Dark Autumn generation, carried the trauma forever. They hoarded cash. They trusted no digital system. They taught their children to grow food and fix machines. The final payment on the IMF bailout was made in 2061, 35 years after the pulse. The total cost, including interest, reached $4 trillion. An entire generation worked to pay off a debt incurred in a single second, and the lesson was carved into the national consciousness. Never again would the country build an economy on a single point of failure. By 2070, the United States had rebuilt, but it was a different nation, decentralized, redundant, paranoid. Every critical system had backups. Every community had local power generation. Every citizen learned survival skills in school. The economy was smaller, slower, but antifragile. The EMP didn't destroy America, but it killed the version of America that believed technology was invincible, that believed growth was infinite, that believed the ledger would always balance itself. That nation died on October 14th, 2026, and what rose from the ashes was something older, something harder, something that remembered the most fundamental economic truth of all. You cannot spend what you cannot access. You cannot borrow what you cannot repay. And you cannot sustain a civilization on electrons alone. Here's what the historians missed. The electromagnetic pulse didn't cause the collapse. It revealed it. America's economy was already built on a fragile foundation. Just-in-time supply chains with no reserves. Digital money with no physical backing. Infrastructure maintained on deferred budgets and borrowed time. The pulse didn't break the system. It simply stopped the electricity that had been hiding the cracks. Look at the numbers. $9 trillion lost in 1 week. But where did that money go? Nowhere. It never existed in the first place. It was ledger entries, database records, promises stored in magnetic fields. When the power died, those promises evaporated. The wealth was always theoretical. The EMP just made that theory visible. And here's the part that should terrify you. This isn't science fiction anymore. The technology to create an EMP exists. Rogue nations have it. Terrorist networks want it. And the civilian infrastructure in every developed nation remains unshielded. The cost to harden the grid against an EMP attack? About $200 billion for the United States. The cost of not doing it? $9 trillion in 1 week. $50 trillion over a decade. But governments don't spend money on invisible threats. They spend money on visible problems, so the vulnerability remains. The single point of failure remains, and the ledger keeps running, balanced on the assumption that the power will always be on, until the day it isn't. The final lesson: history is written in ink, but paid in gold, so what's the takeaway? What's the dark economic truth behind this disaster? It's simple. Modern civilization is not built on ideas or armies or votes. It's built on continuous energy flow. Remove that flow, and everything else collapses. Democracy, capitalism, human rights, international law, all of them require electricity to function, not as a convenience, as a prerequisite. The electromagnetic pulse exposed to lie at the heart of modern economics. We believe wealth is abstract, numbers and accounts, shares of stock, lines of credit. But real wealth is food in the ground, water in the pipes, and fuel in the tank. Everything else is just accounting. And when the power dies, so does the accounting. The United States learned this lesson the hardest way possible. It took 50 years to rebuild, 35 years to pay off the debt, 2 generations to restore trust. And even then, the scars remained. Because the truth is this: sovereignty is solvency, and solvency requires more than a strong military or a stable government. It requires a functioning ledger, a way to track who owns what, who owes whom, and who can pay their debts. An EMP doesn't destroy the ledger by burning it. It destroys it by making it inaccessible. And when nobody can access the ledger, nobody can prove what they own. And when nobody can prove what they own, civilization reverts to its oldest form: possession, force, survival. That's not a collapse, that's an amputation, cutting away centuries of economic evolution in a single second. If this story taught you something the mainstream won't say, you need to subscribe, because history doesn't repeat, but the ledger always balances, and the next crisis won't announce itself with sirens and warnings. It'll arrive silently, just like the pulse. And when it does, the people who understand how economics really works, how power and debt and resources determine everything, will be the ones who survive.